No. It's not trying to shock each other. It's trying to subtly piss each other off.
Well, if that's the goal, you guys both fucking succeed with me.
Yeah. The fun part is when you try to find a little button to push on someone. It's like right here. It's like
I'm a walking fucking button.
Yes.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, are the movies we love and growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I am one of your three co-hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene, not funny, haha, funny, queer, Lyons.
You ought not talk that way. You just a boy.
And each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, the three of us will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Taboo. We also, since this whole coronavirus craziness has happened, we've since Gene launched our Twitch channel, which is really cool because we're adding more content. People have asked us, when are you going to do video? And you led the charge. You were the tip of the spear in organizing our Twitch channel. What can fans who want to see more of us, what can they expect from that?
Raj, I think the Twitch channel is a fantastic way to interact with us in an unscripted way. People may or may not realize that we edit the shit out of these podcasts. So what you're hearing right now, about every minute of audio you're hearing has been edited by me, Roger, or Big D for about 3 minutes. So if you listen to 1 hour podcast, that's 3 hours of work minimum. That's not including writing the description, uploading and stuff. Twitch, all bets are off. You get raw, unedited us, and we interact with you in real time. So it's a great way to interact. You can catch Roger talking about Westworld immediately after the show. You can catch us doing our Shappy Hour on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we're just having a couple of drinks, hanging out. There's me, Raj, and Ash gaming on Twitch. So you can always check the schedule. Just go to shatthemovies.com/Twitch. You can see what's going on our Twitch channel. And it's completely free to view, completely free to interact. And if you want to subscribe or toss us some donations or tips, that's totally acceptable. But we are not gating any of that content. So it's free for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah, one of the things I love about the Twitch is, number one, if you're not a subscriber, then it's fine. There's no paywall like there would be with Patreon. And if you have Amazon Prime already, you can sign up for what they call Twitch Prime. Doesn't cost you anything. And then subscribe for free using your Amazon Prime. And that's a simple, passive way to support the podcast, which I love. So go over there and check it out. It's shatthemovies, like you said, .com/Twitch. That being said, Big D, you messaged us last night saying that we are booked on movie commissions through the end of Christmas.
Well, almost. We're getting pretty close. I think we have 2 free slots in December. So if you want to get something in before 2021, send us an email, make a contribution. So we've been blessed. We're happy. Thank you very much. And this week's commission comes from a previous commissioner, Greg R. He's been with us since 2017. And he said, I'd love to commission the 1996 Academy Award winning Sling Blade.
Now, in case you're wondering, why would anyone send dollars to us commissioning a movie like Sling Blade? You're in luck, because we always ask individuals like Rhaegar to send in a letter explaining why they chose this movie. Gene, you typically do the honors of reading that letter.
I do, Raj, and big thanks to Greg for his 3rd commission and being the guy, I think, who kicked off commissions. He says, if you remember correctly, my initial commission of Rounders was the very first one that got the commission train rolling. Also, wonderful job on my Dune commission as well. For the longest time, I avoided watching Sling Blade based solely on the title. I imagined a horror or slasher film, and those don't often appeal to me. Years after the release, I finally relented and watched the movie, and holy crap was I blown away. It was the antithesis of what I had imagined. Everything from the thought-provoking storyline, the incredible dialogue, the measured and haunting score, and the amazing cast makes this one of a handful of movies I watch at least once a year. Billy Bob Thornton's transformation into Karl is riveting, and country music superstar Dwight Yoakam's performance as Doyle is hilarious and terrifying at the same time. Not to mention performances by John Ritter, Robert Duvall, J.T. Walsh, and a young Lucas Black. But what I really want to consider is the correlation between this story and that of the HBO series Watchmen. I had never read Watchmen comics nor watched the movie. I wasn't going to watch the HBO series either. However, hearing the Shat enthusiasm leading up to the premiere and after the first couple Shat on TV Watchmen podcasts, I started watching the series and I was not disappointed. That got me thinking about the possible similarities between Dr. Manhattan and Doyle. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and the movie in general. Greg R.
Well, Sling Blade is a 1996 drama written and directed by Billy Bob Thornton, who also stars in the lead role. Set in Arkansas, the film tells the story of a man named Karl Childers who has an intellectual disability and is released from a psychiatric hospital where he has lived since killing his mother and her lover when he was 12 years old. As mentioned, in addition to Thornton, it stars Dwight Yoakam, John Ritter, and Robert Duvall. The film was adapted by Thornton from his previous one-man show entitled Swine Before Pearls, and Sling Blade proved to be a sleeper hit, launching Thornton into stardom. It won the Oscar for Best Writing, Adapted Screenplay, and Thornton was nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role. Sling Blade was filmed over the course of just 12 days on location in Benton, Arkansas, and grossed over $24 million on just a $1 million budget, and has gone on to since receive a 96% certified fresh rating by Rotten Tomatoes. Before we dive into the plot and break down this movie for you and give you some awesome patented Shat the Movies quarantinement, we always ask the question, where were you? What are your memories of this movie? We'll start with you, Big D.
So this came out in 96. I was in college at the time, didn't have much money, so you had to be selective with what you went out to see. And I just had no interest in watching this. You look at the cover art and you look at the poster. I thought it was about a mentally challenged man trying to make his way in life. And, he was going to overcome some obstacles, and it just didn't seem interesting to me. After watching this, I have to go back and watch the other movie that I felt the same way, which was What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I have never seen that either. And I suspect after watching Sling Blade, I might enjoy that as well.
Well, Big D, that's exactly what this movie is. It's a mentally challenged man trying to make his way through life. But What's Eating Gilbert Grape, I think, is more of the effects that it has on the family. Gene, have you seen Gilbert Grape?
Yeah, I have. And these movies all came around in the mid-90s where playing somebody who had an intellectual disability was kind of in vogue. So if you remember, there was like John Malkovich in Of Mice and Men. There was Forrest Gump, Benny and June. Like there was all these like movies where the person was either intellectually disabled or had a very strange social quirk. And this, to me, after watching it, is the king of that genre.
But had you seen Sling Blade before?
No, I'd never seen Sling Blade, but I always wanted to. Unlike Big D, it always appealed to me. I just, like a lot of movies, never made the time to watch it. And I don't know a lot about Billy Bob Thornton as a person, like his personal life, but from what I've seen of him on screen, he's an absolutely brilliant actor and a fantastic creative mind. And looking at this movie, it has all the elements I love in a film. It's got Southern culture, the tragedy of the human condition, some death, and a really strong script. So I was super excited to watch it.
Yeah, this is crazy. I guess I'm the only one that had seen Sling Blade before. Now, I'm not proud of this, and I've told stories before in a jokingly manner of how most of the movies, especially in the 90s, I went and saw Pleasure Island with my high school girlfriend, and then we went to Chili's and had disappointing sex. Well, I don't think I've ever told the story of what happened after that, like what happened once I went to college. I'm not proud of this. But the summer before I went away to the University of Florida, I had an affair with a cute girl I worked with at Disney World. She was also going to college. She was a chipmunk, and I was a goofy. We met while working the dinner shift at Liberty Tree Restaurant, which was a place that you could go and have a character dinner. Anyway, the chemistry between the two of us was, dare I say, magical. And I'm not making excuses, but she also had a boyfriend. Well, one of the first nights that we hung out, I rented and watched this with my courtesan, which is a strange movie to make out with. Either way, karma bit me in the ass when the high school girlfriend I cheated on with cheated on me and left me for a Pluto Tigger later that year, which left me spiraling into a deep pit of despair.
Did you actually hook up while this was on?
We did hook up.
Oh, that's disgusting.
I felt really bad. I felt terrible. But we stayed good friends. We actually reconnected during college and dated for a little bit after college as well. She's a great girl, but yeah, it's all my fault. It definitely anything that I've ever done is all my fault. So karma, 100%.
We've gotten breakthrough number 1. Hopefully there'll be a couple of those on this recording.
With that being said, Big D, play the trailer.
In a few minutes, we're going to be in a room with a killer.
What you want to know is what I'm doing in here. I killed some folks quite a while back. They told me I'm well from it now.
Why are you letting him out?
He's free. His time's up. That's the rules.
After 25 years, Karl Childers is coming back to his hometown.
Carl, see if you can figure out what's wrong with this thing. Won't crank up and everything seems to be put together, right?
It ain't got no gas in it.
Finding a friendship he never had.
My name's Frank Wheatley. What's your name?
Carl's my name.
Who's that strange-looking man behind you?
That's Carl. I met him at the laundromat.
Nice to meet you, Carl.
And a family he has always wanted.
Mama said you can stay over with us. I like the way you talk.
Well, I like the way you talk.
Just how retarded are you?
Stop it, though. Mama has a boyfriend. He threatened to kill her if she ever left him.
And you're gonna learn to live by my rules.
Doyle is a monster.
But when the darkness comes back into his life,
He's mean to you and your mama.
he's forced to make a decision he hasn't had to make in 25 years.
I'm gonna kill you deader than a doornail.
Starring Dwight Yoakam, John Ritter, J.T. Walsh. Written, directed, and starring Billy Bob Thornton.
Will you ever kill anybody again, Karl?
I don't reckon I got no reason to kill nobody.
Sling Blade.
Karl Childers is an intellectually disabled Arkansas man who has been in the custody of the state mental hospital since the age of 12 after he murdered his mother and her lover. Prior to his release, he is interviewed and recounts committing the murders with a Kaiser blade, saying, "Most folks call it a sling blade." Karl explains that he decapitated a school bully he thought was raping his mother, and when he discovered that his mother was a willing participant in the affair, Karl killed her also.
So I was kind of expecting, as this started and we see the high school reporter, that we would see visually the backstory, of Karl when he was young, the murder, what went into it. Instead, it's a real quick clip with the reporter. And then we're introduced pretty quickly to Frank and his mother. And that story, I think, is equally dark and tragic. I mean, he really has nobody. He lets this man carry the bags home, and he starts unloading just all of this emotional baggage about his mother being with the guy who's abusing her. She doesn't treat him well. His father died. He comes up with a story at first, but then later admits it's suicide. It's awful. And Lucas Black is killing it. He's delivering these lines like he really is a local Southern kid who's been through these hard times. And I kept looking at his face. I'm like, I know this kid. I know this kid. He did not transition that youth performance into an adult dramatic career. The only thing I remember him from was the Fast and the Furious. And of course, it was the worst installation in the franchise, the Tokyo Drift 2006 version. But as a kid, he was amazing.
Well, one thing that I think is prevalent, and I'm going to gush over in this entire review, is the individual performances, including Lucas Black. When you think of the amount of money that was spent on this, $1 million, the short time frame to film this movie in over 12 days on site, the fact that many of the scenes are set with a stationary camera, you have to rely on your actors to emote and deliver their lines. You talk about how Frankie comes across as very genuine and authentic. Before that, when Karl is in the hospital delivering that entire account of what happens, you don't need the visuals because of the fantastic delivery that Billy Bob Thornton did in just painting this picture of what happened. And he is supposed to be a slow, mentally challenged man. It's incredible. It grabs you within the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, you can tell Billy Bob Thornton understands drama from a playwright's perspective. And like you said, Big D, it was a really smart move not to show a recreation of the killing. You know, you've seen that in so many movies and they just butcher it, especially on a limited budget, like shooting that, making it convincing. It's just unnecessary. Instead, Billy Bob Thornton uses all those tools from stagecraft, right? The spotlight, setting the rules of the interview, drawing all the focus on every slight movement that he does. When you black out the entire of the room and there's a light only on one person, you can't help but look at him. And then his body becomes the depiction of the tale, right? And he does just enough retelling. And then they get that like pulsing drum beat, and then it just stops with silence and the punchline hits. And then you get the girl's voice coming from out of the darkness. And it's startling, right? All those elements coming together. And again, when you're on a limited budget, we've seen movies live by a limited budget and die by the limited budget. And this one is a winner.
Let me ask you this, because I originally thought, oh my God, I don't remember this rape story, the sexual assault by the bully. And then it turns out the mother was a willing participant. How old was this bully in terms, if he's 12 years old, how old do you think the bully was? It's never really fully explained, but what do you think it is?
Yeah, so he's a teenager. So the way that Karl is telling the story is that his dad's boss's son, essentially, who was was a bully at school, was never nice to Karl, is the one. So he's got to be, I would say, like max 15, 16 years old, top. So he's a teenage kid.
Oh my God, that's got to be devastating. But even before they get to that interview, you see this creepy patient, and you think that, okay, well, if he's in a mental hospital, obviously these people have deficiencies that would not allow them to be in standard lockup in a county or a state facility. This character of Charles looks like somehow he has slipped through the system, because he clearly knows what he did was wrong. But he's telling the story of how he used a Mercury car to pick up this young girl who had a lot of hair on her arms, and then it turned out to be a transvestite. This guy is so creepy. And again, how did this guy not get sent to prison?
The thing I kept thinking about in this mental hospital, though, and I thought about this during like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest too, is if you were put in a mental hospital and you were sane, you would go crazy being around these people.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Fuck yes. Do you remember 12 Monkeys? Same thing.
Yeah.
Sitting, listening to these people, I would just fucking lose my mind.
And that's why I'm glad that they diverged from the normal tale of the mental institution, where they had this doctor, Jerry Woolridge. And, you know, if you've read Of Mice and Men or seen The Hunchback of Notre Dame, you see this character like Karl, and you spend the entire movie or story or play worried that awful things are going to be done to him, right? You know that's coming. And it was really nice to have the comfort in this overly cruel world with a guy like Dr. Jerry Woolridge. He's played by James Hampton, who you might recognize as the dad in Teen Wolf. And I don't think I've ever seen the head of a mental institution in any movie portrayed as like caring or friendly. Like he's like an angel. He really cares about Karl.
Yeah, not only that, but usually we see mental institutions. They don't have the money. The staff is abusive.
Right.
They're beating the patients. They're trying to keep them in there to make some money. Jerry is amazing. He actually cares. And in a terrible situation, he knows that Karl, he's going to put his neck on the line. He says, you really don't have any place to go? And he takes him home to his family. This is a convicted murderer, but he has to have faith in it. And it's nice to see that there's one character who at least gives Karl a chance.
This doesn't even look like Billy Bob Thornton. If you've seen Billy Bob Thornton in movies that we've reviewed here on the podcast, like Armageddon, what other ones have we done? I know Armageddon.
Armageddon's the only one I can think of.
Is that the only one that we've done?
Yeah. Well, there was that one time Big D and I did Monsters Ball, but it was a secret podcast that we never released.
But what is it about Hollywood actors that allows them to glow up after they catch their big break? As someone who is battling androgenetic alopecia, I'm hoping that we somehow start making some of that Twitch cheese soon, because I desperately need the same procedure that BBT had after making this movie.
Well, I don't know about the hair thing, but I think a big part of his looks changing is his weight loss, because Billy Bob Thornton gained weight for a lot of his roles, including Sling Blade. His normal weight, I looked this up, he's 145 pounds on a 5'10" frame. Like, he's a skinny dude.
But no, man, if you think about some of the actors who've transformed their bodies, like you have Christian Bale, right?
Yep.
For The Machinist. He gets down to like almost like skin and bones. I don't think the weight loss is as much as he does something simply with his face. The way he scrunches it up and the way he hunches over and the way he moves around and just stands there and looks. It's something beyond just a body transformation. And the general rule I use, and I've said this many times, if I'm watching a movie and it's Tom Cruise, and halfway through the movie, I forget it's Tom Cruise, I'm like, fuck, the actor has nailed it. After the first 10 minutes, there was no Billy Bob Thornton. This was Karl. He was totally inhabiting the character.
What's shocking about this is you say this, but then every movie I've seen with Billy Bob Thornton, like Bad Santa, it just seems like, oh, that's Billy Bob Thornton doing a bad Santa. Like, I haven't seen him transform into a role since Sling Blade. Can you think of one?
No, I think the difference is that he wrote and directed this, and it was something that material that he had kind of created on his own. So he came up with this character, Karl, before he even had a story for Karl, right? And then with the other ones, I mean, it's with his directing too. Like he did All the Pretty Horses, which is one of my favorite Cormac McCarthy stories, and it sucks. It's got Matt Damon in it. It's terrible. and the fact is, because it's not his material, right? He tried to take somebody else's work and direct it. It just didn't click.
Well, Karl finds a job at a repair shop in town and befriends 12-year-old Frank Wheatley. Frank reveals that his own father committed suicide, and Frank introduces Karl to his mother, Linda, and her gay friend, Vaughn Cunningham. Linda allows Karl to move into her garage, which angers Linda's abusive boyfriend, Doyle Hargraves. While practicing with his band, Doyle erupts into an alcoholic outburst and ejects them from the house. Linda tries to throw Doyle out of the house, resulting in a fight, and Frank throws household objects at Doyle until he finally leaves.
So this scene when Karl leaves the hospital, again, we're really worried about him because he goes into town. He's got nowhere to stay. He's got no job. They're just like, see ya. And the first place he stops with a couple bucks in his pocket is the Frosty Cream. And that Frosty Cream scene, it's just classic. You've got two Hollywood titans in their prime, I would say, who both understand the camera and a good script. And in case you missed it, that Frosty Cream boy, that's Jim Jarmusch, who's one of my all-time favorite directors. And he did one of my all-time favorite vampire films, Only Lovers Left Alive. He also did like Coffee and Cigarettes and Ghost Dog, but he's an independent film genius. But if you've ever lived in a small town, I don't know if you guys have, you know this restaurant and you know this counter clerk. They're in every small town. They nailed the look, the feel, and the attitude perfectly.
Normally, I would have been bothered by the pacing of these scenes, but they really try to embody that small southern town and the pace in which they go. People just sit around. You got to eat up hours in the day. You know, you're not actively out doing much a lot of times, especially when you're poor. There's some of the scenes like where Linda and the family are having dinner and the camera just sits there. Or whether it's Karl and Frank on the stump and it just sits there. And in the beginning, it's like paint drying. I was like, oh, come on. But as the movie goes on, I started to feel like I was in that environment and it seemed like it was appropriate.
This is what he knew. Thornton comes from a small town. He comes from Alpine, Arkansas, whose population currently sits at 101 residents. So some of Thornton's personal intense experiences have included physical abuse from his own father, then dealing with conflicting feelings when the man later died of cancer. And Thornton also worked as part of a highway department where one of the duties was cleaning up after sometimes fatal accidents. So between all of those and the tragic death of his brother in 1988 and his estranged daughter going to prison in the early 2000s for child murder, Thornton has all these elements to draw from when creating the script. And you see elements of that, obviously not his daughter because that happened later, but like all these things that happened before that really come to life in this movie.
Yeah, in many ways, this movie was a gift. I don't think I've ever really seen much of Arkansas. And you can tell that Billy Bob Thornton loves his home state, or at least sees it in a way that others might not. There were so many shots where they were really trying to express the natural beauty of Arkansas. Everything was so green. And it reminded me so much of these 5 years that I spent in Lima, Ohio, where you had these mom and pop shops where the paint was peeling. There was a shop that I used to go hang out at called Lyle's Mopeds. It was like this mechanic shop. They just had mopeds and parts laying around. Nothing really worked right. And Lyle was just there. He's just an old guy. And he'd be like, I don't know, get you some Tomos parts for your moped. And people just hung out there. I don't know how they stayed in business, but this was the whole town. Or those walk-up fast food places. Like they had the Frosty Cream here. We had the Whippy Dip in Lima, but it was the same thing. You went by there, you got some French fries, and you just sat at a picnic table and ate them, stared at the clouds.
Well, you talk about like staring at the clouds and telling jokes and living that small town feel. When Karl is first introduced to the repair shop, he's sitting there with the owner and the other repair guy, and the owner starts telling a street joke. I'm going to butcher the joke. Basically, he says, 2 boys hang their peggers off from a bridge. One of the boys from California says, boy, sure, this water is cold. The fella from Arkansas says, yeah, it's deep too. What is the humor here?
Are you 80 years old? What the fuck is a street joke?
A street joke is a common vernacular term when it comes to comedy.
Well, among comedians, perhaps. I've never heard the term street. Big D, you heard a street joke before?
No, street joke. I picture like David Blaine out there doing some card trick.
Yeah, a street joke. It's a joke that is told. It's in the ether. It's constantly passed from person to person. It's not OP. It's handed down from generation to generation. It's a street joke.
I think someone's had one too many trips to the Comedy Cellar. You guys know that I normally hate comic relief and anything. I want a movie to be dark and then just darker. Those are the 2 shades that I want. But there are some seriously hilarious parts of this movie, and I wanted to take a minute and talk about them because it's easy to skip over those, right? When you talk about Sling Blade, there's so many heavy things there and so much artistry going on that you forget that the movie's kind of funny in a lot of times. And there's that great scene where Frank and Karl go to the Hoochie Dollar store, and Frank talks his mom into letting Karl stay over. And while they're in the other room, Karl reveals to Vaughn that he was in the state hospital for killing. And it's just great because she comes back. She's so excited to have them stay with them. It's just comedically smart. Or there's the scenes at the mechanic shop. But my favorite is the band. Like the scene with the band is just much needed comic relief. Because at that point in the movie, you're starting to get a feeling in your gut that things are going to be really bad for Vaughn and Karl. And then they give you this emotional reset. They take a little pressure off. You have the band doing like the spoken word thing. You got the tambourine guy. It's just great. It rounds out the rest of the world.
No, old man Big D kicked in at this point. Okay. When all these drunk rednecks are out there, this group of idiots is practicing on the backyard. I'm like, oh my goodness, that would be just terrible. I would be calling the police. I'm the neighbor who's yelling, hey, turn that shit down. He's like, fuck you. I play cards with the chief of police. But this group of idiots, they just cause me stress because the whole movie, I'm like, oh my God, Karl's so great. I love Karl. What's going to happen to him? They keep building this up to where I thought something horrible was going to happen to Karl. And this group of idiots, they're talking about writing poetry and Maurice and this fucking group. We need to have some paying gigs. We don't need to mess around no more. These guys are just fucking idiots. They're not even in a real band. And then when Doyle finally breaks down and has his like 4 a.m. outburst and he starts kicking these dudes out and just insulting them, I'm like, man the fuck up. All of you could beat the piss out of this weak ass Doyle. Why does nobody stand up? Why do they allow him to walk on him? The only one with some balls is Frank, and he throws everything in the house: tin cans, pillows, books. One looked like the Bible. Nobody else has the balls to stand up to him, and he's cowering on the floor like a little child.
You've obviously never been to a Gene Lyons house party, because when he's ready to kick people out, he's fucking ready to kick people out.
Yeah, but I'll also fucking put somebody's head through a wall. Like I'll sacrifice my wall just to make a point. I've busted many a wall.
But again, I've seen this movie, but it had been some time, and I forgot that John Ritter's character was gay. And I want to say poetically, but they respectfully showcase what it means to be gay in a small town.
Part of the reason why this character of Vaughn works is that John Ritter and Billy Bob Thornton worked together on this character. It wasn't just thrown together. There was a lot of thought into Vaughn. And in case you don't realize it, because he is a supporting character, Vaughn is a very important part of this movie. And they did a brilliant job, as you said, Raj, of portraying Vaughn Cunningham as this gay man living in small town Arkansas. Now, I'm not gay, so I can't say with 100% certainty that this character is accurate. I can't say that I've lived this, right? But I had a few gay friends when I was living in small town Ohio, and there was a certain intonation and kindness and quirks that developed among all these men living in that town that felt very familiar to me. It rang true. And I lived in Lima from 2008 to 2013. So it wasn't that long ago. There was one gay bar, and it had to serve as the home to the full spectrum of the queer community, right? So the lesbians were there, gay men were there, and everything in between. They didn't advertise the bar. People wouldn't park their cars outside because they had a fear of outsiders knowing. You would get a cab to something nearby and then walk over because you don't want anybody in town to know that you were gay. Again, this was not that long ago. And one fun fact is that John Ritter actually made the character Vaughn Cunningham because he wanted to open up the possibility that Vaughn was Chuck Cunningham. And if you don't remember Chuck Cunningham, there's a reason for that. He was the older brother from season 1 of Happy Days that just disappeared after season 1 and nobody talked about him again. So the idea that John Ritter had was, this is why nobody talked about Vaughn. He left Happy Days and just never came back.
Well, Karl is haunted by the memories of the abortion of his baby brother, how it was wrapped in a bloody towel and given to Karl with instructions to get rid of it. However, the infant survived the abortion, and Frank asks why Karl did not keep the baby, to which Karl replies that he had no way to care for it. He was 6 years old. He placed the baby inside a shoebox and buried it alive, saying it was better to return him to the good Lord right off the bat, sparing him the abuse and neglect that Karl himself had received at the hands of his own parents.
So we've talked about the script of this movie, and several times in the movie, Frank comments on how he likes the way Karl talks, and Karl likes the way Frank talks. I think Sling Blade excels in capturing that irresistible dialect, and it just reminded me how much I love the way Southerners talk. Now, I can't say I love everything about Southern culture, but the dialect is gorgeous. And in this movie, it's not just decorative. I try to imagine Karl telling the story of how he buried his brother in any other way of speech. And it doesn't work. It can only be told properly in Karl's specific dialect to understand the way he viewed everything, right? It's like when my mother speaks to me in Farsi, and I understand things that can't be conveyed the same in English.
Which brings me to the point, is Karl mentally challenged, or were the years of abuse that he had at the hands of his parents led him to walk, talk, and act this way?
For me, I think he seems pretty in tune with what's going on. He may act like he's a bit slow and not paying attention, but he's understanding the big picture. And even more important, when he reads the Bible, he understands there's parts in the Bible that he just doesn't understand. He questions things. He understands the emotions of situations. He's retrospective and he's pensive and thinks about how he should have acted. If he had had parents who would have embraced him as a kid, I bet you he would have been normal. He wouldn't have been the brightest kid in the class, but he wouldn't be like right now that everybody thinks he's on the spectrum. And as a parent, it just makes me so sad to think that some kids are living out in a shed, in a hole with a couple quilts. That shit does happen, and that just rips at my heart.
Yeah, I think one of the reveals that we get is that they lied to him about what the Bible says. So God only knows what they were telling him was appropriate. They made him sleep in a shed, and I thought it was because they were poor, but you see later that they had plenty of room in the house. Mm-hmm. They made no attempt to educate him or protect him. Like, these people did not care about him, and I would not be surprised if a small thing he had that made him socially different, maybe like a degree of autism, led to such abuse that he ended up the way he is, right? Being neglected, malnourished, probably physically abused severely, and that's how he ended up.
The other question I had was the baby brother that Karl tells the story of Frank. Was it premature or was it a botched abortion?
Oh, it definitely was an abortion. And the telltale sign is that they said to Karl to get rid of it. Like, you don't get rid of a premature birth. And the size it was, he said it was like no bigger than a squirrel. They wanted it out and gone. I don't think they wanted any children after Karl. Maybe he was a challenge. They realized, fuck that. And then they were just like, look, let's get rid of all the ones after. But with the premature, like, you either have a miscarriage or you have a premature birth. This is something definitely not those.
I think there's actually something in the dialogue that he says, whatever they did to make him come early. He says something that they induced it, whether his dad punched his mother in the stomach, whether it was whatever it was. But that baby was alive. Oh,
You know, we talk about like Rambo First Blood, the first one, right? And a lot of people remember Rambo as like the Rambo of Rambo 3, where he's like shooting exploding arrows and riding around in helicopters and shit. It's the same thing with Karl and Sling Blade. When people think about Sling Blade, they think about the goofy way he talks or the goofy way he walks, and he's kind of like a funny character. It's not really the case. I think one of the most heart-wrenching things a filmmaker can do is give us a beloved character who can't stay in this world or is a danger to us or we're a danger to them. And I think of like Free Willy or Harry and the Hendersons or Powder or Splash, or I think the pinnacle of the genre, E.T. At this point in the movie, with this speech about the abortion, Billy Bob Thornton is really sharpening the dagger to break our hearts with the reveal that Karl has a really hard time processing all the ugliness around him. You realize at this point in the movie, like, he cannot stay. Things will not end well.
Oh, I completely disagree. 100% disagree. So if you think of Shawshank Redemption, Brooks gets out and he can't adapt to the job. He's been institutionalized. Here, we see incremental growth. In the beginning, Karl can't even look at a woman. Karl is now going on walks. He's getting flowers. He's holding down a job. If Karl had found himself in this situation with Linda, Frank, and Vaughn as the father, he could have lived in the back for the next 25, 30 years and been an active member in the church, active in the community. It just happens he got into a shitbag redneck drunk with Doyle.
I agree. And listen, you guys want to talk about a heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching moment. At the end, are we doing Harry and Henderson? Is that on the list, Big D?
Harry and the Henderson, if you want to sponsor it.
The end of that movie, am I giving a spoiler alert? That is the most, as a child, when they're trying to like tell Harry he's got to go. Oh, Waterworks. To this day, it would still be Waterworks.
Hold on. So
anyway,
did you cry in this movie?
I did not cry in this movie. No, because it's probably because I've seen it and the way that I saw it, but I really enjoyed it.
Don't tell Bigfoot to go back to the woods. don't tell him.
Don't.
I had to bury my little brother. That didn't affect you, but Bigfoot having to go back into the woods.
Yeah, that's how I work. Well, Karl visits his father, who claims he doesn't recognize Karl and doesn't have a son. Karl tells his father that killing his baby brother was wrong and that he had wanted to kill his father for making him do it, but eventually decided that he was not worth the effort. Linda and Doyle reconcile, and Doyle announces his plan to move in. Doyle attempts to attack Frank, but a newly baptized Karl stops him and warns him to never touch Frank again. Karl makes Frank promise to spend the night at Vaughn's house, and he asks Vaughn to pick up Linda from her home and have her stay over also. He tells Vaughn that even though homosexuality is a sin in the Bible, he doesn't think the Lord would ever send someone as nice as him to hell.
So, guys, we recently did Saving Private Ryan, which I think is one of the better podcasts we've done. And in it, I mentioned that Garth Brooks refused to play a German sniper in Saving Private Ryan because, boo-hoo, it wasn't a lead role. That ain't a man's man. Like Dwight Yoakam, that's a man's man. They're like, hey, you want to be in Sling Blade? He's like, yup. They're like, okay, you got to play a homophobic, alcoholic asshole who abuses women, harasses children, and throws around the term retard. He was like, yeah, all right. He really runs the gamut from scary to pathetic to weird to just plain awful. And I was like, God damn, he's really good for just being some country star they put in a movie. I didn't realize he's a trained actor and he's been in lots of movies. Also found out tangentially, he has his own line of food called Bakersfield Biscuits, which includes delicious buttermilk biscuits. He also has Dwight Yoakam's Chicken Lickens Chicken Rings of Fire, Chicken Lincoln's Pizza Fries, Takum's Macaroni Mouth Poppers, and Dwight Yoakam's Lanky Links pre-cooked sausage.
Oh. Now, I don't know this because I am not a country music fan, but Gene, you've been to Country Thunder. I think you listen to country music. Are you a fan of Dwight Yoakam?
So Dwight Yoakam did a very, very special thing for country music, and I don't want to go on too long about it, but here's what happened. So when Dwight Yoakam was coming up, he came out of the scene, and of course, he was in Columbus, and he tried to make it in Nashville. But Nashville at the time was doing what they called urban country, and this is like early 90s ish, and he didn't like that urban country sound. He wanted to do what he called hillbilly music, which if you heard a song like Guitars and Cadillacs, it's about playing hillbilly music. So it was very unpopular at the time. So he instead went to LA and started gigging out there, and he would just play free shows on the radio and stuff like that until it caught on. Yeah, he is a top country star. In fact, Johnny Cash called him his favorite country star. And also, I believe Garth Brooks said something that he was like the greatest or one of the greatest country songwriters of all time.
Right. We talk about like Dwight Yoakam, the great performance. How about Robert Duvall? You know that this movie, again, was only made $1 million in 12 days. So you know that he was most likely on set for just that day. I don't know when he got the script or whatnot, but that scene of Karl as he's walking through his childhood home, everything that he said was true, right? You see the hole it dug in the shed. You see that the house was big enough. It had extra rooms so that if they truly wanted him to be inside, and then you see his fucking deadbeat father, played by Robert Duvall, just sitting there talking to him like the loser that he is. And he goes on to say, I thought about killing you, but I realize you ain't worth it. Is Robert Duvall, is he also afflicted with the same situation, or is he as Alzheimer's? What's going on with his character?
No, I definitely think he has some kind of dementia because he's having a conversation before Karl even walks in.
Yeah.
But I think that this scene, besides Duvall, he basically does nothing but sit in his underwear on the chair, just muttering, I don't got no son. This shows and reinforces what I said earlier, that Karl is growing. Karl takes this memory, goes back to the house and says, you know what? I'm going to release it. I'm going to let my father know I thought about killing him, but he's not worth it. I'm moving on. He gets that off his shoulders. If Karl had just not run into fucking Doyle, he could have been productive, but here he's stuck. I guess I got to kill somebody.
Well, it's because of his relationship with Frank that leads him to do this.
Well, Frank, how old was he? 11, 12?
Probably about the same age. I would imagine the intent was he would be about the same age that Karl was when Karl killed his parents.
So if Frank is about the same age as Karl was, he's maybe 12, 13, but he is emotionally much older. He's smart. He's had to learn how to cope on his own. He's had to learn how to get by. He is smart. He understands adult things, even though Karl keeps saying, you shouldn't talk about that. And I started to get a vibe that Karl might have been pushed to the murder by Frank. Frank knows what he's saying. There's multiple times. He's a smart kid. He says, my dad wouldn't let him do that to us. You're older than he is. You're just as strong. Why don't you stop him? My dad would do that. I'm getting a vibe that Frank might have identified that Karl could be a protector and not, hack him in half with a lawnmower blade, but as a protector. Do you think Frank did this, or he didn't realize what he was saying to an adult man who has an issue with abusive parents?
I agree that he was asking Karl to protect him, but yeah, I don't think he was like a mastermind behind the killing or anything.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that he goaded him on. I think Karl, though, you talk about the growth, I think Karl recognizes himself in Frank.
Oh, of course.
Like, at least what I got out of the movie is that I don't think Frank was trying to goad Karl into killing Doyle. That was something that Karl came to the realization on his own because of the conversations he has with Vaughn, because of the conversations he has with Linda. He knows that this is going to be bad. He knows the repercussions of what's going to happen, and he's doing it because he wants to protect his friend.
But you asked Roger earlier if he cried at all during this movie, and I really thought I was going to get through the movie without a tear. Like, I knew it was a powerful movie, but I was like, I'm not really feeling too emotionally vulnerable here until Frank revealed the bookmark that Karl had made him. And in all the clips I've seen from Sling Blade prior to watching it, I never saw this scene. And that bookmark, you're always wondering, like, what does it say? What does it say? And finally it comes out, and it's just 4 simple words: is you will be happy and a heart. And I think what that tells us is Karl understands, like, his own life is done. Like, his path is set. There's no saving himself from the scars of his childhood and the years that he lost. And then he sees, like you said, Frank, who's about the same age. He's angry, he's abused, and he's a different kind of child. And he's running the same risk, right? He's either going to die in that house or he's going to end up killing Doyle. And Karl is deciding to sacrifice himself to create hope for this child that he loves. And I do think that there's a growth there. In this move, he's becoming both the father that he never had. He's becoming a father figure to Frank. And also he's reclaiming a childhood that he can never attain himself. It's one of the most beautiful things I've seen in a movie.
Well, Karl returns to Linda's house, where a drunken Doyle asks Karl what he's doing with the lawnmower blade he had sharpened and fashioned into a weapon. Karl replies, I aim to kill you with it. but not before asking Doyle how to reach the police by telephone. Not taking Karl seriously, Doyle facetiously asks Karl, dial 911 and request an ambulance or a hearse. Karl then kills Doyle with 2 blows of the blade to the head, phones the police to turn himself in, and requests a hearse to be sent for Doyle. He eats biscuits and mustard while waiting for the police. End movie.
I started actively talking to the TV. I thought this was going to go a completely different way. When Karl walks in the house with the blade, I'm like, Karl, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you giving him a warning? You already walked in the middle of the night with a hammer and said, I just woke up with it. He gives Doyle every chance to stop the murder. First, he walks in with a freshly sharpened lawnmower blade. He sits down in front of him, and when he asks him what he's going to do, I'm fixing to murder you with this. I'm like, okay, at some point, Doyle's going to pop up and smash him in the head with that bottle he has. But nope, he answers the question on what to do. How do you call the police? Do you call for a hearse? What do you do? Did Doyle secretly want to die, or did he just really underestimate Karl's ability?
I think he underestimated Karl's ability because I think that's who Doyle is. Doyle cannot think of anyone other than himself. But I do agree, of all the scenes, this seemed the least realistic.
But it seemed like, do you remember where Doyle was about to get abusive with Frank and Karl grabbed him by the arm and stopped him? So Doyle was aware. There was almost that Doyle was this tortured soul and thought that he was drunk there and said, you know what? This might be a good end. I'm just going to sit here.
I think the drunk part might be the key, Big D, because if I was just sitting there and you walked into my house and you had a lawnmower blade, I'm like, Big D, what do you do with that lawnmower blade? And I was drunk. You're like, I'm going to kill you with it. I was like, okay, anyway. And you're like, how do you call the police? I'm like, you call 911, you tell them to send a hearse when you cleave my head in 2. I'm not expecting you to actually do it because I'm drunk.
But let's say the day before, 4 a.m., you were on your waterbed with Sarah, and I was just standing there, and you woke up. Like, Big D, what are you doing with the hammer? I don't know. I just woke up like this. You might be on red alert.
Well, that's different. If I had a waterbed, I'd have a reason to live, and I would fight you. But otherwise, just take me away.
Guys, is Karl a murderer, though? Is he a hero? Was this justified? You know, he's unfortunately, he's back in the hospital with that serial killer pedophile. Do you think Vaughn, do you think that Linda, do you think that Frank come visit him? How should we react to the killing?
I mean, I hate to go back to Of Mice and Men, but I really do get that Lenny vibe from Karl. He's an amazing character. He has innocence. Like, he's not a bad person, but he is lethal. It's not a perversion in his brain. He just has the capability to kill and uses it several times in his lifetime. But I think it's easy to forget how hard life is for Karl. Again, I said that people often remember this movie as he's kind of a goofy character. But this guy, if you watch him throughout his life, he doesn't experience much happiness. Like, he brings happiness to others, but personally, really watch him through this movie. Those mannerisms that we love, that wringing of the hands and the grunts and the little ticks and stuff that we think are cute, to me, it seems like he's struggling. Like, it's agonizing for him to go through his day, and every second is a trial that he can only escape by simplifying his internal dialogue. So in that scene where we see him talking with John Ritter, and Vaughn is saying, you know, trying to lay these heavy concepts on him, he's just talking about French fried potatoes. I think that he's actually filtering down his mind to like basic concepts: food, obedience, simple observations, childhood friendship, because he doesn't know how to deal with anything bigger than that. It stresses him out. And you notice when he's struggling with those concepts is when he's wringing his hands the hardest, and when he's grunting and ticking the most fervently.
You know, I try to look for different or hidden meanings or deeper comparisons to this movie. At the end, when he's going around and he's saying goodbye to Linda, he's saying goodbye to Vaughn, he's saying goodbye to Frank, and even when he's about to kill Doyle, each one of those characters, all 4 of them, call out Karl as the last thing that they say to him. What's the meaning there? I know there's some sort of meaning for it. Why do you think each one of those characters, the last thing they called out was Karl?
I don't know, but they're all culpable. Vaughn should have known what was going to happen. Hey, why are you here? Why do you want them to stay? They could have put the pieces together. I almost feel like they were like, you know what? Karl wants to do his thing. Let's do it. Because at any point, if King B was like, you got to get Sarah and go get June and get them away from Gene's house, I'm going to go talk to him, I'd be like, uh-oh, what's going to go on over there?
What's King B going to do?
What's King B going to do with that lawnmower blade? Yeah.
You know, Greg asked when he commissioned this movie if Doyle being a cold and calculated character that lacks empathy makes him more a god like Watchmen's Dr. Manhattan. And if that's the case, does that make, poor, gentle, kind, empathetic Karl the real villain of the movie? And my immediate reaction is like, no. And I still think no, because Doyle is bad and he's jealous and he's an asshole. And Karl is just a guy whose life was really fucked up by bad parenting. But I'm trying to think through this concept. And although I never really thought about Doyle as a god figure, I could make the case for it, right? Doyle is unpredictable. He's wrathful. He's jealous. He demands obedience, but gives you nothing for it. He claims realms as his home, right? It's Linda's house, but he's saying it's his, even though that realm is paid for and cultivated by others. And he's eventually killed by a character representing humanity. So maybe, if you want to get real, if you want to go Ashley Schlafly on this motherfucker, maybe Doyle is God in this movie.
Old Testament God, not New Testament.
Yeah, Old Testament God, yes.
Right, you got it, yeah.
Yada, yada, yada God.
Go watch Mother. It's a little bit more in your face than this. No, I don't think Doyle represents God. I do believe that this truly is an introspection into how we deal with hardships in our life and how we can rise above that and become better people, even if that means the right thing is a sacrifice. Maybe in that light, I could see Karl being a Jesus-like figure. Like he has to die, like you said, so that Frank and Vaughn and Linda can be happy, can live their life. So maybe, but it's vastly different than Dr. Manhattan or what we saw in Watchmen, the HBO series. So with that being said, that ends our review of the podcast. Now is the time where we break out our Shat meters and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, Zero Wipes is an absolute fantastic movie. It's like going to your little tasty freeze and getting a very large order of French fried potatoes and then being absolutely wonderful. 5 Wipes is coming home and seeing your mother having sexual intercourse with the town bully. And it's just a horrible moment. So 0 is good, 5 is bad. We'll start with you, Big D. How many wipes do you give Sling Blade?
So it is an Academy Award winning film. I can't deny that what they did for the budget, I think, is great. I think it's amazing. It's a very simple film, though. And unfortunately for me, it was far too dark. It was just all suffering. I can say there's a difference between me enjoying a film or the quality of the film. It was a good film, but to me, I don't think it was that special of a film. It was a very simple script written by a man who was very familiar with the environment and with the lifestyle. I think they could have asked some more compelling questions. I think they could have developed Karl. They could have shown us more than just wasting a lot of screen time. It felt long, but in that it is better than a lot of movies. I will not ever be watching it again. I'm glad that I finally did see it, and I will watch What's Eating Gilbert Grape. But for me, it is a 1.5 wipe movie. It is good. It is not my cup of tea, but it is a good example of storytelling, and I think it's worth watching.
I agree, Big D. Billy Bob Thornton did win an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay from his one-man show, Swine Before Pearls, and this is apparent in his portrayal of Karl as a layered and fully developed individual. And you only get that from being on stage, writing the dialogue and knowing this character, every inch of him, going on stage night after night after night. And in a one-man show where you're the only person doing the characters, you know them inside and out. And that really comes across on screen. It's a major risk when an actor portrays a character with a mental retardation or a little bit slow. Obviously, this is famously lampooned in Tropic Thunder with Simple Jack. But that being said, the powerful, realistic, toned-down performance of Billy Bob Thornton, as well as Lucas Black the Kid, in fact, every actor, Dwight Yoakam, John Ritter, they're all putting on masterful performances. To do this in 12 days is a fucking feat, and it's phenomenal. I don't know if we're going to see this again, but with that being said, I think this is a one wipe movie for me. I would even go half a wipe, but I think one wipe is probably, that was my first inclination, so I'm going to stick with 1 wipe. Gene, that leaves you. How many wipes do you give Sling Blade?
Right. Big D said that this movie felt long to him. I was glued to the screen for the full 130 minutes, and I absolutely fell in love with the story, the characters, the setting, and Billy Bob Thornton himself. And now I understand how this film propelled Billy Bob Thornton to stardom and gave him real artistic cred. Like, he is respected as an artist despite doing movies like Armageddon. And the movie is also very mature. Like, it's a maturity that holds up to 2020. One thing that we haven't talked about is the context of when this movie came out. You know, we often talk about 1984 being the greatest year for movies, but 1996 gave us Jerry Maguire, Independence Day, Romeo and Juliet, Fargo, Scream, The Birdcage, Trainspotting, The English Patient, The Craft, and Kingpin, which we'll be doing soon on Shat the Movies. Sling Blade definitely holds its own among all of those films, which are very good films. And I hate to nitpick, but I would give it half a wipe simply because of this strange vocabulary boost that Karl gets after he's baptized. Did you guys notice that? He went from like grunts and monosyllabic responses to like loose poetry. Like, he's just talking freely. And I'd like to think it's intentional, Big D. Maybe you're saying it is that growth. But I was just left wondering how he developed the ability to suddenly speak so eloquently. Maybe it's my own fault for not catching something there. Like you said, Raj, with the 4 Karls, or I was watching the scene where he's talking to Vaughn and it's raining. And I'm like, what does this mean? Is it a baptism from the sky? I don't know. But anyway, to me, it is a half a wipe movie. It is outstanding. I loved watching it. And I'm so glad that Greg gave us the opportunity to review it.
All right. So if you were to add up our 3 scores, half a wipe, 1 wipe, and 1.5 wipes, and then divide by 3, that gives you our overall Shat score, which, Gene, is what?
Beep, boop, bop. The computer says that Sling Blade gets an average wipe score of 1 wipe.
And Big D, if we were to take that 1 wipe score and compare it with all the movies we reviewed here at Shat the Movies, where would Sling Blade rank in the pantheon of Shat?
I don't feel too good about this.
I don't feel too good.
No. This is now tied in the 23 spot with The Empire Strikes Back, Conan the Barbarian, Rounders, another Greg R. film, and Back to the Future 2.
Okay.
Yeah, that feels right.
About that.
Back to the Future 2 had a scene where Michael J. Fox was playing everybody and one of them was upside down. I just want you to remember that.
I agree. It feels right to me. I think this movie is brilliant. I again, does it have that same watchability factor, like where I want to watch it again? No, but it's a brilliant film, and the performances are unbelievable.
Yeah, if you're looking for somebody to just get together with a lady and make out to, it's perfect.
Yes.
No, someone you're cheating on your lady.
Oh, that's right.
At your father's house so that your mom won't find out. Anyway, that does it for Sling Blade. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, Greg R. Now it's time for the podcast where we give our shout outs. Gene, what's a shout out?
Raj, I'm going to call an audible on this one because the last shout outs we had were so horrifically juvenile that I'm going to take the high road and actually read a very nice letter that we got from Tanya from Tokyo. And Tanya says, "Evening, gentlemen and Ashley. This must be my cabin fever talking, but I've just seen all of you in your latest Shappy Hour video on Twitch and decided to drop a few lines. First of all, I live in Tokyo and everyone here still has to go to work as usual, at least in my industry. What we're not supposed to do is do anything fun, like eating out or going to the movies. That's why I personally not only have to drag myself to the office every day, but also miss out on all the amazing things people do from home, like all of your live streams. Second of all, you gotta love the quarantine for allowing the Shat Nation to finally behold the faces of their heroes. You guys all look different from what I personally imagined, but that doesn't matter now. All those guys writing in to complain about Ashley are so going to reconsider because she's such a babe, smiley face. Is there any chance we could also see Carrie and King B? The nation would rejoice. My head would definitely explode. Finally, can I make a suggestion? I know recently a lot of people have been professing their love and devotion to Big D. I adore him too, like I adore all of you guys. But if I were to be completely honest and pick a personal favorite, that would be Gene with his social justice warrior comments and sweet ass studded belt. Why is it suddenly so hot in here? For this very reason, I'd like to contribute an idea for the next line of Shat merch. I would really love to one day don a t-shirt with Mr. Lion's big brown eyes, accompanied by the phrase, see me. In return, I swear to commission a movie so that I can make you guys watch something terrible and prove that we, loyal Taboo listeners, do want to give you money. Anywho, thank you guys so much for everything you do. Love all your pods. Stay safe. Tanya from Tokyo.
Shocking that you would pick this email to do versus our shout outs, Gene. Shocking.
It just ended up in the inbox. I don't know how it happened.
Man, the best was somebody posted today a photo of them having their morning coffee with a Gene Lyons Social Justice Warrior coffee mug.
I saw that, yeah.
And Gene's reply was, drink me. That's right. This shirt might be perfectly fitting.
I'll start sketching up some ideas for the See Me. I could see that work.
Well, I asked Ash, I go, it's just my eyes? Like, what are they doing? She goes, yeah, they're in the clouds, like in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Just there's the clouds of Transylvania and then your eyes. I'm like, I still don't get it.
See me.
Thank you for all of our Shat Nation for following us on Twitch. Make sure you go and do that. Big D, what's the movie we're doing next week?
Right now, I'm sending out a call to all of our Australian listeners. Next week, we are doing a movie that should be near and dear to your heart. And we need you to call in, give us some stories, let us know if it's accurate, because it is the 1986 film that tells the story of a New York reporter heading to Australia to interview the living legend Mike Dundee, played by Paul Hogan. When she finally locates him, she is so taken with him that she brings him back with her to New York City. In New York City, Mike Dundee is amazed by the wonders of the city and the interesting people there. It is commissioned by Andrew C., came out in September of 86, and it made $328 million, and that is U.S. dollars. So Australians, call in. Let us know. That ain't a knife. Call in, let us know.
This is a knife. Yeah, I'm excited for this. All the things that we have on our to-do list. We have Transformers, the animated movie. You can go to our website and check all the movies that are under the schedule to see what's coming out. And if you don't have one that you love, that you absolutely want us to do, there are instructions for sending a commission. That being said, thank you so much, Greg R., for commissioning Sling Blade, and everyone who's commissioned a movie here at Shat the Movies. We love you. We hope you're enjoying our quarantainment that we're giving to you. Certainly, we want things to get back to normal, but hopefully, we're giving you it helps us, and we hope that it helps you as well. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. Just follow the handle at Shat the Movies. Again, subscribe and join us on Twitch. You can also email us, hosts at shatthemovies.com. You can support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing free anonymous surveys so we can sell out to advertisers. You can buy our merchandise, or you can commission your own movie and find all that information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. Also, be sure to check out our sister podcast. Right now, we're doing Westworld 3 times a week. We do an Instacast. We do a deep dive. We do a Telegraph where we read and respond to the best emails. I also do an Insta Twitch immediately right after the conclusion in America. And if you want to watch the replay, you can go to twitch.com. But again, you can find other series that we've done, such as Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, Watchmen, and True Detective. Find all the information on that website, shatontv.com, where everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Be sure to subscribe to one of those wherever you get your podcast. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. 5-star means good on iTunes. That really, truly helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, and Gene, not funny, haha, funny, queer Lions, thank you so much for listening. Take care, good night, and good luck.
And as always, stay the fuck at home.
He was raised in the land down under, where a man thinks on his feet, speaks with his fists, and lives by his wits.
Two beers, all right? One for me, one for me, mate.
A legendary figure about to encounter a world more treacherous than any he has ever known.
G'day. Big Dundee from Australia. How are you? I'm fine. How are you? Just going to town for a couple of days. Probably see you around. Bye.
this your first trip to New York?
First trip anywhere.
Well, we might just have to give you one for free.
Yeah. On what?
How are you finding New York?
A bit of a lunatic asylum.
That's why I love it, because I fit right in. G'day.
Hello.
Sorry. G'day. Look.
My bags! Stop it! Stop
When are you coming home, huh? Well, if you can manage, Wal, I'd like to stay a while.
Wouldn't have anything to do with a certain lady writer, would it?
Paramount Pictures presents
Your towel, Senor Meek.
Paul Hogan
Hey, my man, what's happening?
Where?
as Crocodile Dundee.
You got a light, buddy?
Yeah, sure, kid.
And your wallet.
Got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Crocodile Dundee.